Hi, and welcome to a special solo edition of Total Recall Show. I'm Tom Scioli, author of Jack Kirby, The Epic Life of the King of Comics, and Fantastic Four Grand Design. And you can check out my Patreon. Go to patreon.com, search Tom Scioli. I just got back from a screening of Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Doctor Strange 2, but Doctor Strange has been in a few movies at this point. All those like Thanos movies and stuff. It's directed by Sam Raimi, who is, one of my favorites. I mean, Evil Dead 2 is just, like one of the greatest, pieces of art ever created. People who've seen it know there's really nothing else like it except for Evil Dead Part 1 and Army of Darkness. But yeah, it was just, he's this, amazing director. And of course, Spider-Man, the first Spider-Man with Tobey Maguire, he directed that. That first Spider-Man, like for me, it was like, okay, these Marvel movies are here. It was like, okay, somebody finally did the Marvel formula, which is this great formula that's, sustained like an entire, publishing empire for decades. And somebody finally figured out a way to take that formula and bring it to movies. It had all the all the beats. It had everything you could ever want, and things that had been various ingredients that had been missing from other attempts at adapting this kind of stuff or doing things in that mold. It's at this point he's sort of like a mature creator. He's done a lot. You see like his hand. You see his style in it. But it's not as pronounced as his earlier work, and whether that's like some directors and creators in various art forms, as they mature, they sort of recede to the background. They kind of let the work come to the fore, and sometimes that they sort of become less invested in sort of like their signature moves and kind of become more disciplined creators, more subtlety is something that I think comes with age. And then there's the other way that a lot of creators go, where they become a collection of their own tics. Sam Raimi's gone the other way. There's only so much personality, individual personality, a director can bring to these. These are very, there's like a larger plan. There's a lot of cooks in the kitchen. So it is like, but I mean, Sam Raimi's had a number of these kind of movies under his belt, where they're kind of, I had a lot of expectations about it going in. Doctor Strange is like a favorite character of mine, and I've been spending, I've kind of been getting this like renewed appreciation for Steve Ditko. I mean, I've always loved Steve Ditko, but it's kind of like, man, like, when he's really cooking, there's like something there, and there's like, it's funny because I feel like when he was working on Spider-Man and working on Doctor Strange and his sort of work up to that point, you just really see like a love, like it really seems like he's having a lot of fun. He's really invested. And that's kind of at odds with his reputation as being kind of aloof and kind of like a lot of tough talk of like, these are assignments and I do them and I fulfill an obligation and blah blah blah, like that kind of talk that he had in later life. But I feel and his sort of wanting to sort of have nothing to do with sort of fandom or self. Talking about his work, he always said that like the work speaks for him. He doesn't really want to talk about the work. If you ask him about the specific work, he would tend to go into like sort of philosophical discussions. But like I feel like there was a point, there was this arc in his career where Ditko was very like personally invested in these things, and then somehow got burnt, which happens to a lot of people in the comics industry, and especially in that era. Like the comics industry is it's a tough business, but it's like way it's way better now than it was back then. Like it's come a long way, and I feel like he got burnt maybe in his relationship with Marvel, his relationship with Stan Lee, maybe his relationship with fandom. Somehow something went wrong, and he kind of crossed this line where he never really went back, where it's like he didn't seem as emotionally or personally invested in the work. It felt a lot more rote, and he was certainly became unwilling to sort of talk about it, or participate in fandom. Where prior to that he was he would contribute to fanzines and things like that. Sort of love like this sort of side of Steve Ditko that we don't tend to think of with I've been seeing more of that in his work. I feel like when he was working on Spider-Man and working on Doctor Strange, it feels like he was more in love with those things than Stan Lee was, and possibly more in love with his Marvel creations than even Jack Kirby was with his. Because again, Kirby was older. He was an older creator, so I feel like his sort of wide-eyed, innocent days were a little bit before that. So there might be some earlier stuff in his career that he loved or felt really personally invested in, and then reached a point of sort of just for his own survival had to sort of take a little bit of a more clinical view of what he was working on. But Steve, I feel like he was really had that sort of golly gee kind of energy in his stuff, and it's not really anywhere else after that. Kind of I guess a loss of innocence or something. But anyway, I've been spending a lot of time with Ditko's work lately, and just really enjoying it, and Doctor Strange, and kind of having a new appreciation for it all over again. I was always very fond of that work, but just kind of the way he's laying out a universe. So it was kind of perfect that a Doctor Strange movie was coming out, and there were a lot of flourishes in this movie that were very Ditko-esque. I mean, up to this point, there it's got Ditko's imprint all through it. I mean, when you see that window with those little lines going through it, I mean, you're in Ditko land. The hand gestures, and there's an early Doctor Strange story, one of the first ones, where Doctor Strange goes into a haunted house. It's that sort of classic haunted house setup where he's going into this house that's possessed or whatever, and has to sort of exorcise it. And going into this movie, I was kind of picturing that, or at least having a moment of that, because it would sort of be this perfect Venn diagram kind of thing with Raimi's work, sort of Doctor Strange in an Evil Dead kind of situation, and that that wasn't there. That wasn't in there, but that was kind of something I was sort of imagining being in there. And spoilers, okay? There's a part where Doctor Strange grows a third eye, which I think is in that haunted house issue. That's where it happens. He kind of gets this third eye grown out of his forehead. So and when they make these movies, and especially someone like Raimi, who loved the comics and referenced the comics so much in his Spider-Man movies, he's flipping through that stuff, and that would be one of the first things you come to if you're flipping through them in publishing order, is Doctor Strange in a haunted house. Okay, yeah, and then you see him with the eyeball in his forehead, so that made sense. But yeah, the movie, another thing, Ditko's universe, more so with Doctor Strange than Spider-Man, but also with Spider-Man, felt a lot more sort of self-contained than the books that Kirby was working on at Marvel at the same time. So there were crossovers and guest appearances and things like that. But it did feel like Spider-Man had his cast of characters, and the stories were largely confined to that world that Ditko was creating in there. And then he had his Doctor Strange world, which had, you know, this sort of growing universe. The two would interact. You'd have some like Spider-Man and Doctor Strange crossover, but largely, you know, Doctor Strange was sort of a very contained, you know, thing. A very, you know, he'd sort of be doing his own thing, and I kind of envisioned this movie like was going to be like that too. That it was going to be like a Doctor Strange story, and of course you're going to have like this character or that character show, but it would be largely a Doctor Strange story, where it, as it turned out, it was very, you know, plugged in, you know, for better or worse, it was very plugged into that like larger Marvel cinematic universe thing. And like, the big bad is Wanda from WandaVision, the Scarlet Witch. And I mean, I watched WandaVision and I enjoyed it, but I kind of, you know, it felt like maybe I missed something, or maybe I just forgot or something. But I felt like, you know, by the end of it, there was like, you know, sort of like a resolution and things. But she shows up in this as just like the villain, you know. So I don't know if maybe I missed something. I haven't, after WandaVision, I haven't been keeping up with all the shows. I kind of like dip in on some of them, but like I just haven't, you know, gone all in. There's a lot of stuff. Like I kind of, you know, watched some Loki and then never really finished that, and the Falcon and Winter Soldier. Watched some of that, didn't really finish that, and then, you know, watched a few seconds of Moon Knight. And a little bit of Hawkeye. You know, I just haven't, you know, there's just so much of it. But so maybe I missed something, but yeah, Scarlet Witch is the villain in it, and I was kind of like, I don't know how I feel about her as the villain, because I mean, Marvel is sort of known for like the sympathetic villain, the villain that you can identify with, the villain that you know, and we think of like, you know, Magneto, or you know. But like, it was kind of like, you know, it just, you know, I was expecting some kind of big scary, you know, thing like a Dormammu. I mean, they already used Dormammu in the first Doctor Strange movie, so he's kind of like off the table, I guess. And I don't know who the close second would be, you know, post Ditko. There've been plenty, but anyway, like, so she was the villain. But as the movie went on, it kind of made more and more sense. So if this was like a development that is like sort of just a surprise that they just sort of hit you with at the beginning of this movie, that kind of knocks you off your balance a little bit, and you need a minute to kind of catch up with it, you know, it worked. Like that aspect of it worked and made sense, you know, archetypally or what, because it like it made me think of like, you know, other things where like there's like a witch as the villain, and it made me think of Narnia, like, oh, it's just so many of like the fantasy elements, and Wanda kind of, you know, fits that archetype of like the witch, of, you know, the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and then of course it's like, you know, Wizard of Oz, you know, Surrender Dorothy, and you know, she's spending, you know, the movie trying to capture America Chavez, you know, who's, you know, sort of this like, you know, young innocent, you know, who would be like a Dorothy, and of course Sam Raimi, one of his more recent movies was a Wizard of Oz sequel or prequel, I guess. So that kind of makes sense, and then you know, even more so, you know, Marvel being sort of a Disney thing, it kind of, you know, is like Snow White, you know, where the Scarlet Witch is this is like the queen who wants to, you know, is jealous of Snow White, wants to take, you know, what she has, this like sort of beauty and youth. She wants to sort of, you know, steal her youth, and since that's not possible, she, you know, kills her, or tries to kill her, and in this, you know, Scarlet Witch is trying to like drain the essence, drain the power and the life force out of America Chavez, and America Chavez is a character created by my friend Joe Casey, who I worked on Godland with, and you know, it was kind of in the news recently that like, I guess Marvel had offered him $5,000 as like a, I don't know, like a thank you payment or royalty or something for the use of America Chavez in the movie, and you know, and he said something to the effect of, hey, that's an insult. So you know, that was sort of on my mind, you know, watching the movie. I haven't watched all these shows, so maybe she's shown up in other Marvel shows, and maybe Wanda, maybe you see her heel turn in one of these other shows. And then another one is like Mordo. He's talking about Mordo. Now, in the first Doctor Strange movie, Mordo was like sort of his best friend, and then by the end, he's like, we got to part ways. Like we have philosophical differences over, like, you know, the Ancient One using, you know, the dark dimension magic or whatever, you know, violated, you know, the sort of code of conduct that, yeah, and so Mordo, you know, that classical thing of like two best friends becoming arch enemies. But and then in this movie, when he meets Mordo again, like a Mordo from another dimension, he says how, like, oh, Mordo, me and him, we used to be best friends, but now he's been trying to kill me and stuff. And I didn't remember that from any of the movies. Like, I know that from the comics. Baron Mordo is like a villain from day one in the comics, and then a couple issues in, you see, you know, the origin of Doctor Strange, and Mordo is worked in there as sort of, you know, like a friend, sort of, you know, like they're both disciples of the Ancient One, the Sorcerer Supreme, and then, you know, and then go their separate ways. But anyway, I don't remember seeing any kind of movie or show where Mordo is like, hey, I'm back and I hate you, you know, with Doctor Strange. So I don't know if, again, that's something maybe I missed, or it's, you know, that sort of storytelling, sort of classical comic storytelling and serialized narrative storytelling where you have a bunch of stuff happening between issues. So maybe, you know, Scarlet Witch turned evil in between issues, and Baron Mordo and Doctor Strange had a bunch of fights between issues. And the way you're finding out about it is by, you know, that bit of dialogue. You know, they go to other dimensions. It's kind of cool. See, you get this like glimpse of a bunch of different alternate universes, and for like 1 second passing by, you see the Living Tribunal, which is this like cool sort of like godlike character from Doctor Strange, part of like the post-Ditko era of Doctor Strange, but like a worthy addition to the Doctor Strange mythology. Came shortly after. I think it was like, you know, Marie Severin and Stan Lee, or maybe Stan Lee and Bill Everett or something. But yeah, super cool character. That's the thing. Like, the Ditko Doctor Strange was great. It was amazing. It's a really wonderful body of work. It's you know, somewhat complete. It's you know, it's a really good, like, you know, body of work. Same with his Spider-Man. In fact, Spider-Man is maybe even better contained body of work, because Peter Parker does go through this arc, and by the end of it, he like really grows up. He does go from being sort of the callow youth to being an adult by the end of Ditko's run. And then there's like a couple issues after that where it's just sort of he becomes like a standard superhero, and so there's sort of like I guess like an epilogue or a denouement or whatever, where there's a couple issues where it's just sort of standard superhero fare. It's like, okay, he went through all those bumpy ups and downs on his road to becoming, you know, an adult superhero, and now he's an adult superhero. And maybe if Ditko had stayed on, it would have been that. It would have been just, you know, Superman or whatever, and not all those like little things we love, all those like ups and downs and you know, personal things. But yeah, Doctor Strange had that a bit too. But after Ditko leaves, there's a lot of great Doctor Strange stuff after that. You know, you know, that sort of varies with these Marvel characters. Some of them, it's like after Kirby left, it's like, ugh, you know, for a really long time. Doctor Strange had a lot of cool stuff. I mean, it is, and a lot of cool new characters introduced, and when you get like Gene Colan working on it, you know, just is such amazing stuff. And then the Steve Englehart era, and you know, but it's like what might have been. I'd love to see, you know, where Doctor Strange would have went had Ditko stuck with it, because it does. He created this you know, his own universe, or a multiverse. I don't think he ever used that. Those words ever showed up in that sort of, you know, Steve Ditko, Stan Lee run. But like, he did create all these like alternate dimensions, all these crazy like demonic characters and godlike characters, and like that aspect of the series just got like more and more interesting as it went on. And man, if it went on another 10-20 years, you know, what would it have morphed into? Like you know, really amazing. But the people that followed sort of did their best and, you know, came up with some cool stuff. And Living Tribunal is one of those things. Shows up for 1 second. The super fans, you know, are like, whoa, I'm sure. And, you know, and the people who didn't catch it will see it in, you know, these like articles, you know, of like, look there, you know, freeze frame here, and there it is. The Living Tribunal. Who knows if there's some other cool stuff that I missed, but Living Tribunal I saw. And then, you know, you had a Bruce Campbell cameo, which I guess is it should be unsurprising. I hadn't really thought about it. And John Krafielski shows up as Reed Richards, Mr. Fantastic. You know, hey, I worked on Fantastic Four Grand Design. You know, very important work to me, very important comic, very important series. So it was kind of like, oh, you know, here's one for the home team when he shows up. And, you know, he, you know, played it admirably. Like, it was, you know, straight off of the page. Like, he looked like the way, you know, Mr. Fantastic has looked in maybe like the past 10 years of Fantastic Four comics. You know, he had the beard and everything. And, you know, he read as Reed Richards. Like, he came across as Reed Richards, for better or worse. I feel like I have my own feelings about Reed Richards, and I feel like, you know, like Marvel, you got to do something around Reed Richards. You gotta beef him up a little. Like, you got to figure out a hook, because he is like boring and like snooze and like, oh God, Reed Richards. Like, he's nobody's favorite. He's really like, he really kind of sucks. Like, he kind of, but that wasn't always the case. You know, in the old comics, he didn't suck. He just got to a point where he did suck. And I know how to make him not suck. And in the course of Fantastic Four Grand Design, I, you know, came up with like a bunch of cool angles for him and things. But after having finished that work, I have this pretty clear vision of like exactly how you would sort of reclaim this character and make him like the coolest character at Marvel. It's very, very simple, very, very slight alterations, and he's there. He's a superstar. But you know, Marvel, you got my number. Give me a call. We'll talk, and I'll fix Mr. Fantastic for you. But yeah, he sort of shows up and it's like, hey, cool. There's Reed Richards, Mr. Fantastic, and he looks spot on. He really is Reed Richards, Mr. Fantastic, and I don't give a shit. Like, you suck. Fuck you. But yeah, he was there, and you know, and he's like an alternate universe version. And Black Bolt shows up, and he's pretty cool looking, and he's one of my favorites, and a deep cut and a Kirby character, and it was cool seeing him. And I only watched like some of the Inhumans TV series. I don't know that like Black Bolt ever shows up in that full, you know, Black Bolt outfit, but he was in it in this and looked great. And you know, and the cool thing was, since this was an alternate universe version of these guys, they all get killed. You know, they get, and the way Black Bolt meets his end is pretty awesome. The way Mr. Fantastic gets killed, pretty awesome too. And since it's the multiverse thing, you can have, you know, Jim from The Office show up and in the next one, and it's like, hey, I thought you died. And it's like, that was an alternate universe version of me. Here I am, it's the real me. And also, like, in that alternate universe one, he, you know, Wanda asks him, like, are you married? Do you have kids? And he's like, yes, and yes, you know. And I thought, oh, well, there's a bummer, because that's part of the problem with Mr. Fantastic is he's, you know, like why he's so, like, ugh, gross, or what, he's a dad. Like, who gives a fuck? He's, you know, and, you know, so, like, I mean, he can get there eventually, but, you know, like, for the cinematic universe, hey, let's, when we introduce the Fantastic Four, let's have a little bit of soap opera. Let's have a little bit of romance, and let's not have him be married and have a bunch of kids right off the bat. You can get there, but let's start off and have a little bit, will they, won't they, with him and Sue, and love triangle, and Submariner. Hey, is she in love with Reed, or is she in love with Submariner? Who's gonna end up together? Let's have a little bit of that in the movies, and maybe people will care about these characters instead of having them have these romantic subplots that were resolved before any of us were born. Hey, how about we make them unresolved and then resolve them within our lifetime, so we can sort of experience that thing instead of being like, oh yeah, they got married back in 1967 or whatever, and they had a bunch of kids back in 1968. They had Franklin, and then in 1972 they had Valeria, and then it was cool seeing Professor X. It's like this is like a fan's dream. You're seeing everybody show up. Kind of poignant having Patrick Stewart in there again as Professor X. Like, love to see him. He's the first X-Men. That and Blade were like the sort of starting points for these like modern Marvel movies. Very popular as Captain Picard. Very popular as Professor X. He was Professor X in like how many movies, and it's cool seeing him in this. Kind of poignant though, because his voice doesn't have the timbre that it used to have. I mean, he's getting up there. He's older, and same as with Stan Lee, like in sort of his last couple cameos. That in Captain Marvel, they had to sort of dub in dialogue from recordings from the 90s, because he just, like, his voice didn't, it couldn't summon that sort of Stan Lee stentorian oration that he used to do, and kind of similar with Patrick Stewart, but he's an amazing actor, so that becomes part of the performance. It's like Professor X obviously is been through a lot more things and seen a lot more, lived a lot more. But yeah, very poignant. But yeah, it was kind of cool going through this trip through multiple universes. Like, again, like in the beginning, I was kind of like, I wanted a little more Sam Raimi and a little less, big Marvel crossover. Oh, here's this character from this, and here's that from that. And I hope you've been paying attention through all these shows and movies, because now it's all coming together. I kind of wanted less of that, but as it went on, it kind of like, it worked. It kept moving. You're in a different dimension every so often, and there's emotional stakes that are working, and the through line works, and you get interspersed throughout in increasing order, like increasing amounts of Sam Raimi-ness, and sort of culminating with the appearance of, a Marvel zombie, of zombie Doctor Strange. Doctor Strange possesses the body of his own corpse from another dimension and becomes zombie Doctor Strange, and then big culmination where he's getting attacked by the damned, by the lost souls are like attacking him, and they're these Raimi-esque, sort of zombie-ish skeleton kind of ghost things, and they're attacking Doctor Strange, and then Rachel McAdams tells him, "You're the sorcerer, or you're the master of the mystic arts. Show those ghosts who's boss." And he kind of pulls all of them towards him and makes a new cape out of them. Makes a cape of the undead, a cape of lost souls, so zombie Doctor Strange with a cape of lost souls, super badass, very like Spawn or something, but just really wonderful marriage of sort of the Sam Raimi aesthetic and the superhero aesthetic. Big thumbs up to that, and and again, like the stakes escalate. It felt like I don't know, I felt, very connected to this movie, like more so than the last couple, Marvel movies and shows. It just really, like, you felt like, you're in that familiar, universe or multiverse that you love, with characters and doing interesting things and going places you haven't seen before. Just really had a lot of fun with it. It was, I felt like it was very original. Like it didn't lean on as many of the cliches as sort of the Marvel movies have been. An enjoyable diversion, a yarn that unspools through it, and interspersed with some really effective little set pieces and a couple of good scares. I dug it. I thought it was good. I did sort of get the sense at a certain point of like, okay, I'm enjoying this. This is good. But is this a classic? Is this something that I will revisit? And that's harder to say. That's kind of, only time will tell. And a lot of those things kind of depend on the emotional core of these things. And that's why I do revisit the Raimi Spider-Man movies because of that. And of course the Raimi like the first Spider-Man, the Raimi Spider-Man movies do have some really great set pieces, particularly the first one. There's like so many little isolated parts where it's like, oh, let me watch that part, let me watch that part, let me watch that part. And this has some of that too. Maybe the most sort of ultra violent of these movies. It gets pretty gory here and there, and again, since it's multiverses, you can sort of have your cake and eat it too, where it's like, here's these familiar, beloved characters, and now let's watch them get eviscerated. They're in the Baxter Building, and it's patrolled by Ultrons. Benedict Cumberbatch seems to have relaxed into his accent in this. His accent in the first Doctor Strange was very annoying, very nails on a chalkboard. I really wish they would have just let him speak in a British accent. It's like, so what? Okay, Doctor Strange has a British accent now. Who cares? Like I think it would fit the character, and I think Benedict Cumberbatch would be more comfortable because he wouldn't have to do this extra task of like, oh yeah, I have to, while I'm emoting and reacting, I also have to remember to send it through this filter of this American accent that I've learned. He speaks like the next door neighbor on Small Wonder. He speaks like, oh, don't you know? He's like, oh yeah, it's me, the Sorcerer Supreme. Oh yeah, the I'm master of the mystic arts. Don't you know? He does sort of the Francis McDermott accent in Fargo. It's just completely like not appropriate and distracting. That was in the first one. It's toned down. It's a lot more sort of natural. He's worked out those kinks, and he's very comfortable in the character. It kind of, reminded me. I mean, there are so many like parallels between sort of Tony Stark and Stephen Strange, but I couldn't help thinking of, I'm going to say Morton Downey Jr., but Robert Downey. I couldn't help thinking of Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark. Benedict Cumberbatch has kind of become that for this, where he's been in a bunch of the movies. He's kind of the glue that holds a lot of them together. He was in the Spider-Man, the previous Spider-Man movie. He's all over the Avengers movie. So it's kind of like he's kind of like the guy that holds it all together now in this sort of post Tony Stark era. Here I am in the Dark Dimension. Thumbs up. I'll watch it again. But in the meantime, I'm working on my project, which has not been announced yet, but it's super cool. You'll be way into it, and working hard at it, nose to the grindstone. And thanks for watching. Like and subscribe. We got a lot of cool stuff on here. You've been watching the Doctor Strange in the Mountains of Madness episode. Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. It has this sort of Lovecraft-esque title, so it's kind of a warning that it's like a little more. You've been watching the Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness episode of the Total Recall Show. I'm Tom Scioli, author of Jack Kirby, The Epic Life of the King of Comics, and Fantastic Four Grand Design. Follow me on Twitter at Tom Scioli. Check out my Patreon. Go to patreon.com and search Tom Scioli. May the runes of Ragador be ever at your back. The Dread Dormammu. There's an interview of where it's Mark Bolan of T-Rex interviewing Stan Lee, and they're talking, and Mark Bolan is trying to impress Stan Lee with all his Marvel knowledge because he is a fan, and he references Doctor Strange in his songs, and he references Silver Surfer, and then Stan Lee's talking with him, and Stan's talking about yes, and Doctor Strange's villain, the Dread Dormammu. That doesn't help Stan's case for saying that he came up with everything. We'll see you in the dark dimension with the Dread Dormammu. True believers, Excelsior, Tralfamador. See you, folks.